Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this discussion by Urbani Foundation, Bengaluru. We're back with our event of the month. My name is Shravasti. I'm an editor for Bengaluru chapters with Citizen Matters. And we are a media organization reporting on critical urban issues, ideas, and solutions for cities. Our topic for today is what the data says about Bengaluru's water crisis. I would like to take 2 minutes of your time to tell you about our work, since some of you may be new. We are part of Urbani Foundation, an independent non-profit committed to citizenship, cities, and community. Our mission is to connect people who want better cities with the civic information, tools, networks, and resources they need to make it happen. Our flagship program is Citizen Matters, a civic media platform with insightful reports on critical urban issues, ideas, and solutions. We deep dive into issues which affect our quality of life, including water, commute, public safety, air quality, governance, education, environment, local economy, and more. We also host Opencity, a civic platform for urban data. In addition, we host many events and workshops to help citizens learn, engage, and become civic change makers. Before we go ahead, I would like to make some ground rules very important. First of all, please mute yourself. Only the panelists and moderator are allowed to unmute and speak. Secondly, please share your questions in the Zoom chat box. For those of you who have joined from the YouTube live stream, please put your questions in the YouTube chat box. We will try our best to address each of those questions. And I would also request that if you have a question for a specific panelist, please mention that as well. Of course, it goes without saying that please do not indulge in any kind of trolling or abuse during the event. With that, I would like to hand over the session to Vaidya, our moderator for today. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Thanks, Shivapura. I'm Vaidya. I handle the content as well as the community, this one for outreach for Opencity. We are an urban data platform who hosts data on cities, including Bangalore, Chennai, Mumbai, Hyderabad, Delhi. So first I'll start with introducing the panelists. We have Mr. Vishwanath Srikanthaya of Bioma Environmental Trust, is popularly known as Enrainment on social media, and he has been at the forefront of making Bengaluru water resilient with the Million Wells project. And we have Shashank Palur, a hydrologist at Well Labs, whose recent report on how water flows in Bengaluru paints a picture of the inflow and outflow of water in the city. Satish Mala, Vice President of BAF, Bangalore Apartments Federation. Raghu Rajgopal of MOD Foundation, who is the liaison civic coordination and facilitation. And we will have presentation from the 6 Datajam teams, and the presenters will be Biswa, who works as a research ethics and integrity officer at NCBS Bangalore, and along with him will be Vidya, who works as a product line manager in a tech firm. For the second team, Malavika, who is an urban practitioner with a background in architecture and communication, and currently a fellow at IIHS, and she'll be supported by Upasana, who is an urban planner and an urban fellow at IIHS. Arundhati and Dishant will be the next team, where Arundhati is an urban fellow at IIHS, and so is Dishant. The next team would be Aniket, who's a product manager by profession in Bangalore, who loves to solve problems and build narratives. And after that, Srichand, who's a tech professional working in the non-profit and social impact industry, supported by Karthik, who is a data geek, working primarily with public data sets for 5 years at How India Lives, including geospatial data. And lastly, we'll have Priyanka, who's a recent graduate of architecture from CEPT University, India, and is an urban fellow at IIHS, supported by Nikhila, who's an architect with compartment S4. With that, I'll invite the panelists, invite Biswa and Vidya to talk about their first, this one, which was about how the access to water varies across city. So I'll be sharing their presentations. Yes, Biswa.
Yeah, thank you, Vaidya, for the nice introduction, and thank you for organizing this meeting. So, as a team, what we wanted to look at is about the outskirts of East Bengaluru and from where the water comes and how much water they actually need and all those things. So the last weekend we looked at the population of Bangalore, which is ward-wise population. Yeah, just click Vaidya. Yeah. So from this map, we can see the Mahadevpura or eastern outskirts of Bangalore. The population density is quite as much as more compared to the central or western suburb. Then we looked at the groundwater data for the different parts of Bangalore. Yeah. So the red color shows for East Bangalore, and here we can see the groundwater has been going down since 2016. So compared to other parts like Yelahanka, north or south, the Bangalore East is facing the groundwater is quite going down. And based on the consumption and from the population data, we also estimated the yeah the domestic requirement, which is approximate 88.31 mld in the region. And from that, we also evaluated that they could also generate treated sewage as a 70 mld, and calculating from Bangalore rainfall and the area of the region, we found approximate 121 mld water. So this is just to show you that this much water we need as a domestic requirement, and treated that 70.65 mld can be also used as a commercial or construction purposes, and 121 mld from rainwater. It depends on how much we can harvest from rainfall. Yeah, next slide. So then we looked at the consumption based on consumption water. So from where they get water and on what terms they depend on these particular areas. So the red color shows that those areas are primarily dependent on private water tankers, and the blue region shows they are depending on BWSSB or Kaveri water as well as borewell plus private water tankers. And the yellow region shows that they are depending on private water tankers and borewell. So basically, in all these areas, they have to depend on private water tankers. If not fully, the frequency may be lower in a few parts, but they have to still depend on private water tankers. So what could be the reason? We also looked at the BWSSB connections data. Next map. Yeah. So here we can see that there is a lag of BWSSB connections, which could force them, or this could be the reason they are wholly depending on borewell or mostly private water tankers. Also, we saw that the groundwater data things. So as a result, in especially in the East Bangalore, the societies, the people they live, they have to depend on private water tankers. So what could be done? Maybe we can provide them BWSSB connections, and to recharge our groundwater or to make it more efficient, we can have recharge well, or we can have also open spaces, which also will improvise the groundwater table. And the treated water, as we found, that amount of treated water can be used for road construction or building constructions, as suppose against what we see most of the times they are using groundwater for construction purposes. And also at a policy level, we may incentivize the landowners there to adopt for rainwater harvesting, so that we don't have to depend on more on private water tankers. So this is the whole idea about the East Bangalore, especially about the water consumption and resources. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Bishwa.
Yeah.
Now I will take it up with the second team, who looked at how the projects are coming up in different parts of the city and what it means for the water in the city. So Malavika, I think you're the person talking about it.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for introducing us. Yeah, so our project was to analyze the water source of various RERA approved projects. You can go to the next slide. Just for a little context, we are all aware of Bangalore's development pattern. Just in 2002, there was around 37.4% of built-up area in Bangalore, and by 2020, that percentage has increased to 93.3%. And in consequence of that, it has put a lot of pressure on our water resources of the city. So in that conjunction, we wanted to analyze what RERA can tell us about this kind of development pattern that we're seeing in Bangalore. So RERA is the Real Estate Regulatory Authority, which was organized under the RERA Act of 2016 of the Government of India. So this is a portal where real estate authorities and real estate projects have to get approvals for all of their real estate projects. Can you go back 2 slides? Yeah. Yeah, so all of the, it was meant to be a way to enable more transparency and accountability for real estate projects. So on their website, all real estate projects have to submit their application forms and get that approved. So we first scraped the data using Python, which is a form of collecting all the publicly available data that's been submitted to this portal. So from that information, we started seeing how can we compare this information with what it has to say about the water sources of each of these projects. So as a part of their application, you can see in the table in the slide, the information that we particularly used for this data jam exercise was where these projects are located according to their PIN code. The address is also given, the number of units of the project, and the water source that these projects have mentioned in their application forms. So out of the sample size that we had of around 2,500 projects, we just picked the top 19 to 20 projects which have units of over 1,000 in their built up space. So our problem statement was, how can we understand the water supply of RERA approved projects with over 1,000 units in their built up area? You can go to the next slide. So for this, we first, because the information provided in RERA is of the PIN code boundaries of where these are located, it became a little difficult to start placing them, which was also why we took just the top 20 projects, because it allowed us to individually geotag each of the projects on the map. So what you can see behind in the light blue color is the PIN code boundary of Bangalore. And on that, we overlaid the BWSSB boundary. So that is the boundary within which BWSSB supplies water to the different parts of the city. So after we placed the BWSSB boundary, we then placed the location of the 19 projects that we picked, and started also color coding what they mentioned as their water source. So as you can see, out of the 19 projects that we have taken, around 12 of it lie right at the boundary of the BWSSB boundary, and 7 lie outside the boundary itself. So that means that those projects that are outside the BWSSB boundary will have to find other sources of water, which is often groundwater or tankers that they have to rely on then. And all of these projects have mentioned their source of water as either local authority or self-development. We've marked, color-coded both of them too. The local authorities are marked in blue and self-development is marked in red. But the problem again is we are not aware of what these terms mean, what local authorities are providing this water, what self-development means, what kind of interactions they would have to rely on to get the supply of the water. None of it was clear in this data set that we had. So this project that we did was our way of exploring what this new data set of RERA that's available publicly can tell us about the kind of water stress these new developments are creating for the city at large. And just by standardizing what your source of water should be or can be, what the categories have to be mentioned in the application form, if we just standardize that, this could be a very valuable resource of tracking then of development projects that are happening, especially the projects that we took have over 1,000 units. So the kind of need they have for water and the kind of stress they create on the city is also large. In this way, we wanted to see if any correlation can be made between the water stress of the city and the development that we're seeing. And we built a few recommendations, not just for RERA as a project and a portal for collecting information and what this data set can then be used for planning of the city, but how these BWSSB approvals itself can be made better. All projects have to get a non-objection certificate from the BWSSB when they're submitting their proposal to RERA. So in this process itself, if water can be prioritized because it's the need of the city right now, then if we can standardize how this water is utilized by the development projects, we can then start tracking better solutions of how these development projects can be supported or regulated as well. So that was what we did in this project. Thank you.
Thanks, Manavika. For the next talk, while we are looking at how all these large projects are going to be stressing water resources, on the other side, there is also contamination because Bangalore is also a very industrial city. So I'll hand it over to Arundhati now to talk about her project, what she did in the data jam, her team did in the data.
Hi, thank you for introducing us. So our project is called How Contamination Travels, and it's a study of how effluent contamination happens in the Pune industrial area. Could we go to the next slide? Okay, so for an introduction, we were studying Pune, which is the 41st ward of the BBMP, located in the northwest part of the city. And what it is a predominantly industrial area with certain residential pockets, as can be seen as per the master plan. And within the industrial areas, we found through the economic census data that shows us how most of the industries that are located within this area are actually manufacturing industries. On a parallel note, we also found out that most of the establishments are actually commercial establishments, and 15% of the establishments located within Pune are home-based establishments. Now, when we talk about the water grids, which is on the top bottom right of the slide, we noticed, so all of this data we got from Opencity and worked with on GIS, and we noticed how the sewage line actually drains into the primary stormwater drainage lines. And this we saw in light of a previous study that was done by one of our group members, who had also noticed that all of these water flows actually go and drain into the Shivapura Lake, which is located in Pune. Now, what that does is, in the case of deterioration or failure of pipelines or overflows during the rainy season, all the affluents from the nearby catchment areas are actually flowing into the Shivapura Lake. And the residents also, from preliminary data collected by our group members previously, we'd also found out how this water is actually reported to be discolored and smelly. Could we go to the next slide, please? So on the right-hand side, the map that is located over there, the patch of pink is the Shivapura Lake, and surrounding it is the catchment. Now, if we move to the maps on the left-hand side, they actually show the turbidity index of the different parts of groundwater in the area, or surface water on the area, which we noticed was increasing very significantly over the past decades. So this data is also from the PCB reports. And we also noticed that subsequently, alongside this, there was an increase in the BOD levels as well as the coliform levels within the Shivapura Lake in the monsoon season, which indicates that during the monsoon season, due to the runoff from this industrial area, the Shivapura Lake is also experiencing a further contamination of water. Now, when we move to the map on the right side, it shows us through upslope analysis and through hydrological tools on GIS, we found out the catchment area of Shivapura Lake, which means that in this catchment area, at whatever point there is a flow of water, it will go and drain itself into the Shivapura Lake. Now, after that, we thought we'd overlay a list of polluting industries, water polluting industries as per the PCB in the Pune industrial area, which is annotated by the yellow dots here that we can see right now. And we noticed that a lot of these industries were actually located within the catchment area of the Shivapura Lake. And when we overlaid bore wells, as you can see in the green color in the GIF that is accompanying the slide, we noticed that a few of the bore wells are actually located within this catchment. and most of them are actually located right in proximity to them, which also indicates the danger of contamination that these groundwater bore wells are at due to the percolation of groundwater, polluted groundwater into the ground. Could we move to the next slide, please? So what do we do with this understanding of the contamination of the Shivapura Lake? So what we did was, using the upslope analysis tool on GIS, we tried to understand where all does this contamination go. So what we did was we identified the channel network that is basically the same channel. We identified the channel network for this lake, and we noticed a couple of other lakes also on the same channel network. So what we did was we tried to calculate using these hydrological analysis tools, we tried to create catchment areas for all of these. And we noticed that up to 5 kilometers and way beyond the city's limits, the lakes that are there actually have a catchment area which overlaps with the catchment area of the Shivapura Lake, which also indicates that every time Shivapura Lake is contaminated and water flows and overflows in other lake, which also happens in the context of Bangalore, it not only creates contamination within itself, but it also leads to an added risk to all of these other 4 lakes that are there on the map, which stand at the risk of contamination due to overflows or flooding. So our observation was primarily that not only then in this case are Pinia's industrial areas polluting the Shivapura Lake, but it also leads to other lakes on the same network being at risk of contamination simply because of them flowing into each other. So this was our set of analysis from this study, and we also were intrigued to find out that the contamination in this case actually travels way beyond the city's limits. So that was about it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Malika. Okay. Yeah. So the next theme is for the water security index. So Aniket and his team looked at what it means to come into Bangalore and understanding your situation with respect to water. Aniket, you're on.
Yeah.
Am I
Yes.
audible? I've heard some comments about low volume.
Yeah, you're fairly audible.
Okay, cool. Over to you, Aniket.
Thank you. All right. So we heard the last 3 teams talk about specific issues in specific areas. And a lot of the people who came for the water jam were also folks who had specific skill sets, like about understanding data, understanding GIS, understanding maps, etc. Right? And we have been hearing water shortage in Bangalore now far more vehemently on news, on social media, in personal talks with your friends and with the community. Without these skill sets, without this data set being available, without having to read through all of this complicated system or complicated data points, how can somebody who's out there walking on the street wants to understand if they are in a place which has a bit of which has water security or not, right? So we wanted to do the hard work for them as a team and basically look at every data set at a ward level. This data set, we will talk about what it means. And answer the question that if somebody has to ask this question to oneself, that am I water secure living in Kormangla, living in Harloor, living in Whitefield, can they look at some common, very easy to understand metric and say, yes, I am compared to X, Y, Z, what? So that was the objective. We first had to define what does water security mean for us as citizens of Bengaluru. And we identified 2 kinds of water security. One is a direct water security, second is indirect. The first one is that we, our families and our community get uninterrupted access to water for drinking, sanitation and domestic purposes for now and for the future, right? So that essentially implies that whichever area I'm looking at, I need to know that the water that I will be having will be potable, will also be useful for domestic purposes, and the access will be uninterrupted today and as well tomorrow and maybe 5 years later and 10 years later down the line. The second metric that we look for as water security, we wanted to classify it as a very layman statement and not go after data in this. The statement was that our city should get uninterrupted access to water for any commercial usage, which sustains me, my family, and my community's economic development. right? So because we know that without water, we will not be having power, we will not be having, let's say, even basic things like going to office and having drinking water, right? Or construction for that matter, which supports a lot of economic activity, like development. So these were the two broad statements within which we wanted to function. And what then we wanted to basically go and understand how does water flow through our life, right? So that was what we looked at as water supply. So for example, groundwater availability, BWSP pipeline connections, informal water supply are key metrics which form the city's water supply today. These then translate into water usage in that particular area. For example, high rises and low rises that are built, presence of commercial buildings, and the domestic usage per person, which then after the usage is complete, we have to go and replenish the water sources, which then goes into consistent good rainfall, water bodies and green cover in that particular area, or the wastewater treatment and reuse. With these 9 data points, we wanted to come up with one single number or one single value, which will, if a person stands today in the map of Bangalore and says, okay, I live in this ward, how water secure is my ward, or how water insecure is my ward? That was the value that we want to come up with. And that value then we represent it in the map format. So if you go from the darker colored wards to the lighter colored wards, you're going from a water insecure place to a water secure place to a water insecure place. This outcome would ideally be, let's say, a dashboard or a map which can be hosted by BWSSB somewhere. And anyone who wants to check, okay, this is my ward, I live here. These are the metrics that impact me today. And then this is, I'm fair. I'm fairly secure in my particular ward today. I'm fairly insecure in my ward today. I have to go to and talk to my BWSSB office, etc. Right? This was the water security index map that comes out of looking at all those 9 data points. There is one more point that we definitely wanted to add, which is the governance part of it, which means if today I have a problem, how easily can I go about addressing that problem via the mechanisms that are available with us, right? Once we add that, this will become a slightly more holistic, slightly more and fully enveloping map for a citizen of Bengaluru to look at and also make decisions about where they want to buy a place, if they want to move to some different place, etc. Right? So that was our outcome. And yeah, if any questions, happy to answer those questions.
Yeah, thanks, Aniket. I think we'll be taking questions at the end. Also, Srichand, Karthik, one of you guys, do you want to be presenting yourself or because I don't see a slide here? Srichand, Karthik, would one of you be presenting? Okay. So I think we can move on to the next one, which asked a very important question about whether Bangalore can survive without the Kaveri. I think this is on a lot of people's minds these days. So I'll hand it over to Priyanka. Yeah.
Thank you for the introduction and the opportunity for us to present this today. In our attempt to work towards the water crisis, we tried to problematize the fact that we are dependent on Kaveri as a source of water in the first place, a resource that is 100 kilometers away from the city, 350 meters lower than the city's elevation, and BWSSB has to spend approximately 3 crore per day as electricity charges to pump water over such long distances. So we just started pondering and questioning, since the extraction from Kaveri water is recent, how did Bangalore operate in terms of its water needs before this? And Bangalore has a system of tanks which supported its agricultural lands and people, but today only a few are functioning and help replenish the groundwater. Yes, the next slide. So if we do not want to depend on Kaveri as a source of water, the question is groundwater, or can groundwater be a long-term solution for the city? Earlier, the undulating terrain of Bangalore was harnessed to identify high ground and low ground. Inhabitation mostly took place on the high ground, and the lower grounds were harnessed to construct water tanks and retain water. This engineering was actually quite path-breaking for its time, since it leveraged the rain as the most important resource to cater to water needs. However, today we don't see this idea of high ground and low ground, and there is density everywhere. And even though rainfall has increased over a period of time, we are not able to retain it to cater to our water needs, while the same water causes floods in the low-lying areas. So the question is that if water follows the logic of the terrain, that is the section of the land, high ground, low ground, when it comes to governing land, why do we still apply a very plant-centric approach when it comes to governing resources such as land and water? So our approach was that what if we began to appreciate the terrain of Bangalore and leverage it to strategically retain all the water that comes in, to retain it. So to think of it sectionally so that it allows us to respect the terrain and think of the water cycle better. So as you can see on the diagram on the left corner, bottom, fresh water from natural aquifers is used to cater to daily household and residential needs. All of the water that comes out as wastewater can be treated at neighborhood level STPs and reused entirely in nearby industries, as the water consumption for manufacturing is quite a lot. It can be used for vegetation purposes, vegetation itself being a strategy to think or act in terms of making sponges in the city to retain water. And the rest of the clean water, depending on how clean it is after being treated, can also be let out into the tanks. And these tanks that must then also be naturally located in the low-lying areas, and hence will be constantly rejuvenated, and not just by this water, but also rain. And they will replenish the groundwater aquifers that can be used for freshwater consumption again. And what you see on the right is a water balance sheet of the current and utopian year as derived from the water report by Well Labs. It offers a very conceptual picture of how the existing water loop can be optimized. As you can see, by tapping into or by conserving runoff water that can be entirely absorbed by localized solutions, making full use of treated wastewater, and also treating the rest of the untreated water, which is currently being wasted quite a lot, we will be much within the limit of the total water that will be needed to cater to the predicted amount of water needs in 2051, depending on the which we worked out by seeing the predicted population. To make Bangalore a self-sufficient residential city. And for now, we have let go of commercial and industrial requirements just for the ease of calculations. But of course, this is an idealistic and conceptualized section and calculation. If we were to only rely on rain, tanks, and natural aquifers for water. However, if we were to think about this in reality, more local solutions might be needed to be incorporated in terms of the existing built-in infrastructure to incrementally realize this approach. Yes, next slide, please. So in order to implement this vision, we map the elevation data of Bangalore against existing ward boundaries to arrive at a categorization of wards according to their terrain. Red being the highest elevation, while blue being the lowest. We then arrived at a matrix that places elevation data of wards against their existing water retention performance. For now, we have only taken tank area into consideration, from no existing tanks to almost 25% of the ward being covered to tanks. So that was the range that we identified given the existing ward boundaries. And as you can see below, we also plan on including other parameters to make the retention index more nuanced. That also takes into account borewell or groundwater levels, groundwater storage capacity, and land use data, which will allow us to see if there is existing built fabric, which will then limit our scope of intervention then and make it more local and sensitive. So we are hoping that this matrix then allows us to design specific, sensitive, and place-based approaches, and as well as solutions to increase the water retention, both in terms of tank and percolation capacity, depending on the elevation of the land. So for example, if you see what is in red, for example, 34, in the case of Hemingapura, policies can be framed towards mitigation of floods because it is a low-lying area with very little amount of tank percentage. So again, then are there possibilities of introducing retention areas or tanks? But for example, what you see in over here with 20 to 30% of tank existing, while the elevation also being very low with the score 1. In the case of, say, a ward like Varaturu, policies towards safeguarding the resources and the lake buffer, wetlands, increasing biodiversity. These kind of solutions can also be thought of. So yeah, we wish on developing this matrix further and taking this framework forward to have a very place-based incremental strategy to reach our vision. Thank you.
Thanks, Priyanka. I think I will check if there is anything else, any other presentation. No, we don't have the fifth one, so I'll stop sharing now. Yeah. So the fifth presentation is Karthik and Srichand. If you're around, if you want to present, this would be a good time. Otherwise, we'll move on to the rest of the panelists. Yeah. Okay. So I think we'll move on to the next of the panelists. So first thing I want to ask Mr. Vishwanath, we had good rains in 2022 and we have had 1 year of shortage and we're already here. So you have repeatedly spoken against doomsday warnings of day zero, etc. on multiple channels. So I want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear your thoughts on the presentations itself and the current situation in Bengaluru and what can be done going forward.
So, Vaidya, let me first congratulate all the presenters, and every one of them is excellent, and it fills me with jealousy in terms of the kind of richness of the exploration of ideas that is taking place. So it's fantastic, and it's so much learning. I wish I had more time to be there with each panel to spend time to understand some more deeper questions around them. In terms of your other question about the doomsday scenario, I think we are assured of 1,470 million liters from the Kaveri for the up to June or July, and that we are going to get 775 MLD by perhaps May, June, or July, right? So 2,225 is assured from the Kaveri for the next 3-4 years. So if that 2,225 is to be distributed equitably, it's more than 100 LPCD, which is good enough for a citizen. The challenge is, would it get distributed evenly? Plus, there's a lot of wastewater, treated wastewater that's now currently available with our wastewater treatment plants, which can be brought to use, right? In terms of identifying lakes and filling them where they have the maximum impact on the aquifers. If we get that going, the city will still need tankers in certain pockets, but a lot of it will be addressed by Kaveri as well as groundwater. So therefore, I'm not so much of a doomsday prophesizer or somebody who believes in that, because the final reason is that if you believe in that doomsday scenario, the solution will be Mekedatu or Linganmakki. That will be more disastrous than the problem that we prophesize. So let's work out, as these panelists have done, to see how we can get all water for all.
Great, thank you, sir. So next I will like to ask Shashank. You were the co-author of a water balance report for Bengaluru analyzing the water flow in the city. So where do you think are some crucial and obvious gaps that are missing out in how we are managing the water in our city? You also recently wrote an article on the wastewater potential of the city. Could you elaborate on that too?
Yeah, so I just like to congratulate all the people who presented. It's been like from the day of when they worked on the data jam, they have come forward significantly, and like a lot of improvement I could see in their presentations. So, and it's now more gives us more actionable results. Coming to the wastewater aspect of the water balance. So a lot of, like right now, like wastewater is a resource that is constant throughout the year, because even if rains fail, people still find water and consume water from somewhere or the other. And there's this constant supply, even though it might fluctuate if there is like severe conditions like this year, but it's almost more constant than rainfall. So one of the ways to harness this is like you kind of bring it up back to a level where it can be used for different purposes. So in our water balance report, when we kind of did an analysis on how it's being treated, where it's being treated, and where does it go. So like a lot of it, what we found out was like still the BWSSB to the central STP treats majority of the sewage that is generated in the city. However, again, sewerage connection being provided to everyone is still not happened, and hopefully it might happen in the future coming years. And around 13 to 14% of the sewage is treated by apartments on their own. So, like apartments are mandated to reuse treated wastewater within their premises, but what about others? Like the centralized STP, they are putting so much energy and resource into treating the water, bringing it up to a decent quality level. So why are we kind of just letting it run off? I mean, there are good initiatives like the lift irrigation projects from KC Valley, HN Valley, and now soon to be coming up Rishvavati Valley. But the thing is, there is significant amount of wastewater left after that that the city can still reuse through, like how Mr. Vishwanath said, that through putting it in, cleaning up the lakes and then putting it into it so that it recharges the groundwater table. Then other places where the water quality is not that much of a concern, you can use it for those purposes, landscaping, industries, cooling, thermal power plants, which is already being done in Yalanka. So, like, I feel that this constant supply of water, which is there in form of wastewater, can be harnessed to kind of offset the other uses that currently are being supplied by fresh.
Thank you, Shashank. So next, I would like to ask Mr. Satish Mala, Vice President of BAF, his perspective from the apartment associations on the water shortage. So what are the conversations like amongst associations, and how dire is the situation? Which areas are most affected in your opinion? And more specifically, I would like your thoughts on the recent move to allow apartments to sell treated water from their STPs.
I think Vikram is here. Satish will join.
Okay. Yeah, hi,
Vikram.
It looks like he's also dropped out. So I think I would ask Mr. Raghu, do you have anything to add from your perspective with Mott Foundation?
Well, thank you, Vaidya. I'm again, overwhelmed, and I would like to congratulate the brilliant minds. We met them during the Datajam and the presentation today again. Their concern for the city and the conviction to solve the problem is what says a lot. Instead of sitting back and bragging around about the city's problem. Now, while observing the entire process, I had a couple of pointers which I had made a note of. Initially, I would like to actually remember Nada Prabhu Kempegowda, who had built a lot of ponds across the city, and each of those were contoured to fill the ponds in the downstreams. And each of these ponds were channelized with the normal earthen channels where a lot of percolation used to happen, the seepage used to happen, groundwater used to be charged, and aquifers used to be filled, right? So in 1960s, we had around 262 lakes in Bangalore. We are left with 81. Who moved my lakes? I really feel bad that the youngsters today who participated in the logjam, we were not so active in those days. We could have saved the city. Gone is gone. Now, while we say 81 lakes, probably if we have to revisit one of the group which talked about contamination trends, today the fear of these 81 which are interconnected might in fact overflow with contamination to another lake. If you have to see 81 lakes, are they usable? Is the water clear? Is it contaminated? We certainly do not have data about the report on the water which is there. And can we rely on the borewells around those lakes, which is going to in fact be charged up by these lakes? If we really fill these lakes, we are not sure today. So the 81 lakes is a question where probably we need to look at whether this can be a little help for adding up to the recharging the ground and usability. And most of these are dependent on the STPs built on the periphery of the lakes, And today, none of the STPs bring out a report saying that this treated water is eligible to be connected to the lake. We don't have any data today. And most of it, if you see the froth, if you see the color of the color of the water and the fish kills happening in each of the lake, today we are not sure whether this lake is even good for the aquatic lives. So this is one of the points which we need to certainly look at, whether are we keeping these lakes right? Even the 81 lakes, whatever we left with, are we keeping this fine? Okay, now the second component is, as one of our panelists added, I think Mr. Vishwanath Chikandaya added that we have 1,450 MLD of water coming from Kaveri, right? So when we say 150 and another 775 coming from the phase 5, the entire distance of distribution is around 8,700 kilometers of pipeline, which means there is a transmission loss of 30%, which we have not mastered in India. The transmission of loss of 30% of water itself is a huge loss. A. B is these are also in fact pumped with 62 booster pumps and 57 ground levels. That means the water loss from KRS till the TK 4 pumps. Number one. Number two is from the TKLE balancing reservoir to you. There's another 30% of loss of water. What are we going to do to contain this loss of water in the transmission? This itself is a huge savior for us. If I say 1,450 MLD minus 30% is a huge loss to us, number one. Number two is, as we said, 700 MLD of water is actually supported by the borewells. Now the borewells, half of them, they say it is actually, we have around 16,000 borewells in the city, out of which 6,000 odd is dried up, which means the stress on the 1,450 MLD is increased because those people who are relying on borewell is depending on the Kaveri water if they have both the connections at home. So that is how the short supply of water which is happening across the city. Number one. Number two is recently what BWSSB chairman expressed is there is around 1,480 MLD of sewer generated by the city, which is equivalent to 70% of the consumption of the water what we are doing. Which means, what are we doing with the 70% of the wastewater? 70% of the wastewater, as per BWSSB data, they have 36 HTP, and out of this 1,057 MLD is treated. So most of the STP are at the valley level, which is at the downstream. You cannot pump it back as a grey water to be used across, where the resource is lost, either in fact sending it to Kolar or any other places. So we are losing that 70% of the water, which is a wastewater, which could have been otherwise treated and used. So what is the suggestion here? Suggestion is many of the experts had told much earlier that we should look at decentralized STPs, where there will be a hyperlocal treatment of the sewer and reused inside an environment. But yes, land is a question, but wherever it is possible, we should plan that, we should at least treat sewer. As they say, the waste should not go out of the ward. It should be in fact inside the ward. Either you generate gas or you recycle it. In the same way, even the sewer should be treated. Sewer should not go out of the ward. Number one. That is one of the pointers which I wanted to bring in. So now this. I'm sorry, there was a disturbance. Now, there are a lot of STPs in the apartments, right? And there is one of the gentlemen who spoke about water for RERA projects. I'm talking about water for newly approved RERA construction, projects of construction. Why the treated water is not made mandatory to be used for construction in Bangalore? Even now, a lot of construction suck water from the borewells and use it. Yeah, why can't we in fact store it for human or life use and restrict any construction to use only treated water? because there is no building which gets infected and viral fever and things like that, right? You need to just use it for construction. This is something, a policy matter which the state government has to take up and restrict construction to use only STP water. Now, the second thing was the RWH story has died down a bit. There is no enforcement. The enforcement of RWH was not good enough for whatever size of the plot what they decided, so that our groundwater would have been charged, the wells would have been filled, the borewells would have been intact. Now, for an example, there was a case study which we did last year. A senior citizen on his terrace of 1,200 square feet was able to collect 5,000 liters of water within 15 minutes. After filling, the water used to overflow into the drain, which means what happens to the runoff water which is happening in Bangalore? We are not able to collect it because we are concretized everywhere and we are not able to seek the water into the ground. And whatever is draining out is entering the Raj Kalve, which is contaminated with sewer, which is contaminated with the effluents from the local industries. And today, for example, if you take K100 channel, the entire outlet has been diverted from Bengaluru Lake. So we are not able to capture water into the lake. How can we rejuvenate a lake when we are not able to capture storm water coming in a stormwater drain? This is something which we have to clean, but there is a good news. K100 waterway project has taken off 120 MLD of sewer out of the drain, and it has been put into the KC Valley Amrit pipeline, which goes directly to Belur Nagasandra STP. That is one good news. The last mile of 25 MLD which was remaining is also being diverted in the pipeline, which will leave us with only 5 MLD, which will be treated with the Ayala system, which is a nature-based system which treats sewer. So that will be a benchmark project for all the drains across Bangalore, which has been already approved and funded also by World Bank to take up the similar kind of project with Shivapura and other stuff. So this is one step which the city has taken, which it's an initiative by the government. This is only one good news. Okay. Now, apart from this, when we have to look at RO, nobody looks at the loss of water from RO. 1 liter of RO, if I have to consume, 3 liter is wasted because it is used to wash or clean the filters, XYZ, whatever it is. And I don't know, nowadays, few of the households are using this water, but otherwise it is mostly drained out. Number 2 is there are a lot of RO plants in the city. Probably if I take an average, there are 3 RO plants which was built by each corporator in each of the ward. 198 wards into 3 on an average is around 600 ROs. And if you go to any RO, ask him to show where the outlet is. The outlet is led to the drain, which is 24/7 draining. I can give you proof and video across most of these ROs. Where is this water going? Why it is not channelized? Why it is not being used? Or if you don't have a system to reuse this, shut down the RO, use the borewell to supply it to people. We are bringing all stringent measures on the citizens only for austerity on water. On the other hand, we are wasting this much of water. So this is something which, which I feel that, we have to push the government to take certain action on usage or containing the wastage of water this way. And probably, I think I would have finished most of my points. No, that's it. I'm through.
Yeah, thanks, Raghu. So are there any questions from people? Yeah, I see some questions. One, Sandhya is asking this. Does citizens' participation on RWH, is citizens' participation on RWH critical for helping resolving this crisis? Should not government help and force people to implement proper RWH on all existing buildings, apartments, and office? I think this would be a good question for Mr. Vishwanath.
Yeah, this is from YouTube.
Okay.
I mean, this question is for me or Mr. Vishwanath?
More Mr. Vishwanath.
I think he's there. Yeah.
Is he there or?
No, probably we can take that the RWH should have been enforced by BWSSB, right? So as we say, it should be a joint effort from the RWS as well as the BWSSB in terms of the reach out. Okay, they issue notices and they also help people to achieve that. My only contention here is we should be very careful when we are actually storing these waters from the RWH. There should not be a source of contamination nearby. Probably a leaking sewer or some place where there is contaminated source which also affects this water table. Otherwise, it's good to go. And of course, it's a joint operation. If you see the way the resources are utilized by the departments, they will not be able to achieve everything by themselves. It should be certainly a joint effort.
Thanks, Raghu. Yeah, so I think there's one more question. Samir asks, what about accountability of the builders? Was there any new laws made or conversation done with them? I think this is for water usage by builders itself. Shashank, do you want to take this?
Yeah, that's exactly what we were hoping to explore through this also. It doesn't automatically hold accountability is the problem, because right now it's not standardized for what they need to submit as their water source. And that's the kind of intervention that we see this going forward with, because if it's mandated that they need to choose these kind of water sources as their options when they're declaring for the NOC, then it will help us hold accountability a little bit more. RERA was envisioned with the purpose of holding more accountability for the real estate sector. But the way that the application is done right now, it's not coming through fully. But little interventions like standardizing what they need to put in as their water source, there being a check in the BWSSB layer of when they get approvals from their local authority for their water source, if there's a check of what are they listing, if they are stating multiple sources of water sources like tankers and a mix of BWSSB infrastructure, then how are they accounting for that? If it's part of the process that they have to explain how much demand they have for water when they're projecting their needs itself, these kind of things could be made a part of the RERA application process itself, which would help more accountability be included in the process.
Thanks, Monica.
Yeah.
I think there's one more question. We see large pipes coming off our metro lines. Can they be utilized, stored, and not to let flow wastefully? I think there's a bigger question about what is the water that metro lines are using itself.
Can I take this, if you don't mind?
Yeah, please.
Okay, that's a fantastic question actually. There are two phases of it. One is when they are building an underground metro, there is a lot of seepage water which is being pumped into the drains. And this is only done in the initial period, but later on, after we complied, they started using it for the construction. This is in the construction phase. But incidentally, Dharmamudi, where the Majestic Metro, Chickpet Metro, both are underground station. During the rainy season, there will be 40,000 liters of water pumped every alternative day outside the basement, okay, which actually reaches the drain. Right now, there is no system to capture this and use it anywhere. Nobody has thought about this. I've been seeing this past 2 years from COVID times, what comes out from Majestic as well as the Chickpet Metro. When they talk about seepage from the metro station, there's another thing which has been also already discovered, that the basement number 2 of UBCT has a seepage of 1 lakh liters per day. Though they have made a provision of 1.5 lakh liters of tank and they use it for their own building, whatever is the excess is still going into the drain. So we had suggested Raja and them to use it for constructions, but somehow they are not able to capture it and transport it to the construction sites. But this is a very good question. Probably, I think we will have to look at BWSSB or the BBMP exploring the option. What happens or what comes out from the seepage water from the basement too. Yes, this also raises a question. Can somebody answer? BIAL needs huge quantum of water. Where are they getting it and how are they getting it? And there is city railway station near to the Majestic Metro. Can this be diverted to city railway station to clean the coaches? This is a good question. I think probably we will have to, in fact, do another round of discussion on this.
Thanks, Raghu. Any other questions from YouTube?
Nothing at the moment.
There is one point being made. I think it's the idea of framing the groundwater aquifer as commons. There's one comment here. Thank you for the insightful presentations. Thank you to the organizers for making it available online. While water and infrastructure are inseparable and is largely centralized, which is problematic as the data shows, continue to be interested in the idea of framing the groundwater aquifer as commons in Bengaluru with bottom-up citizen participation for collective stewardship with policy support. It would be great to hear from the panelists and Datajam participants about this. I think this is a good question. Anyone wants to take this? Shashank or Raghu?
I'm sorry, I missed. Can you repeat if you don't mind? I'm sorry.
I think the question is about, we have the groundwater in Bangalore. Can it be considered as a commons that is available for everyone instead of being available directly for private usage with a collective stewardship through policy?
Okay, you mean to say misusing the groundwater, borewell water for construction?
No, in general, the question is about, should groundwater be made a public utility rather than similar to what we use Kaveri from? That is, we don't have private usage of Kaveri directly. Can we just make groundwater do not allow borewells at all? I think that is the direction of the question.
Yes, I think the DCM and the BWSB chairman told that water underground is nobody's property. Okay, it's a government property, whether it is a borewell within your premises. They can take control of it for use of the public. Nothing is enforced. Rules are there, but it's not enforced. There should be a rule brought for wells and borewells across the city, and there should be some regulation. But only thing is they don't have resources to manage this and map it. So if we have to really, in fact, map, I think the radar team which address the radar projects should, in the next data jam, if we really organize it, map the borewells across the city and map the borewells by RERA to the construction, to the utilities where, it supplies to the apartments which is already built where there is no network of water. Probably, I think these are the nearest point where it can be supplied and it can be rationed also.
Thanks, Raghu. Any other questions? Am I audible? Or is my volume low?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay. Any other questions from YouTube?
Not as of now.
Okay. So I think we can wind up.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks all for joining. I think Krishna sir has dropped off. Thanks, Raghu. Thanks, Shashank and Rashmi, and thanks for all the participants also. It was a great session. Thank you all.
Thank you.